26F, have been married to my husband, Mark, E28M, for 3 years. We met in college, and for the most part, things were good. We had our challenges, like any couple, but I thought we were a team. I thought we were building a future together. His family was a big part of our lives, especially his sister, Clara. She was always around. At first, I thought it was nice that they were so close. I tried to be close with her too, but over time, I started to feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Mark always seemed to put her first. Her opinions mattered more than mine. Her needs came before ours. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would always get defensive. He would say I was being jealous or insecure. He would tell me that is just how his family is. I learned to keep my feelings to myself. I learned to smile and nod when Clara made little comments that chipped away at my confidence. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself that this was what marriage was about. Compromise. Sacrifice. I did not realize I was the only one doing either. The day of Mark's 28th birthday started like any other day. I woke up early to make him his favorite breakfast. I had bought him a thoughtful gift, a watch he had been wanting for months. I had saved up for it, putting a little money aside from each paycheck. I wanted to make him feel special. I wanted him to know that I loved him. His family was coming over for dinner that night. I spent the entire day cleaning the house and preparing the meal. I wanted everything to be perfect. His mother, Helen, was a kind woman, but she was quiet. She rarely stood up to Clara. His father was much the same. They let Clara run the show. I knew the dinner would be a performance. I would have to play the part of the happy, doting wife while Clara sat at the head of the table, acting like the queen of the castle. I braced myself for the evening. I told myself I could get through it. It was just one night. For Mark. I would do it for Mark. The guests arrived right on time. Helen gave me a warm hug and handed me a bottle of wine. Mark's father patted me on the shoulder. Then Clara walked in. She swept past me without a word and went straight to Mark, throwing her arms around him. She handed him a large, extravagantly wrapped gift. It was much bigger than mine. I felt a familiar pang of smallness, but I pushed it down. I smiled and took everyone's coats. I led them into the dining room where the table was set, and the food was waiting. The conversation started out light. We talked about work, the weather, and a recent vacation Mark's parents had taken. I tried to join in, but every time I spoke, Clara would interrupt me or change the subject. Mark did not seem to notice. He was laughing at her jokes, hanging on her every word. I felt invisible. I just focused on serving the food and keeping everyone's glasses full. After the main course, it was time for cake and presents. I brought out the cake I had baked, with candles flickering on top. Everyone sang happy birthday to Mark. He blew out the candles and made a wish. He looked happy. For a moment, I felt a surge of warmth. Maybe this night would be okay after all. He started opening his gifts. His parents gave him a nice sweater. His father gave him a bottle of expensive whiskey. Then he opened Clara's gift. It was a brand new, top-of-the-line laptop. Mark's eyes went wide. He was speechless. It was an incredibly expensive gift. I knew Clara did not have that kind of money. A sick feeling started to creep into my stomach. I did not know where it was coming from, but it was there. Mark gushed over the laptop, thanking her again and again. Then it was my turn. I handed him my small, neatly wrapped box. He opened it and saw the watch. He smiled, but it was a small, polite smile. It was nothing like the excitement he had shown for the laptop. "Thanks," he said, setting it aside. "This is nice." My heart sank. I had spent so much time and effort picking out that watch. I had been so excited to give it to him. To see it dismissed so easily was a sharp, painful blow. I tried not to let it show on my face. I kept my smile in place. That was when Clara decided to speak. She looked at me from across the table, her eyes cold and sharp. "That's a sweet little gift, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "But it really shows where your priorities are." I was confused. I did not know what she meant. "What are you talking about, Clara?" I asked. My voice was steady, but inside I was trembling. She leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table. "You never put him first," she said, her voice loud and clear for everyone to hear. "Mark worked so hard for us, for this family. He deserves the best. He needed that laptop for his new business idea. I had to step in and get it for him because you clearly were not going to." The room went silent. Everyone was looking at me. Mark's face was unreadable. His mother looked down at her plate. His father cleared his throat uncomfortably. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger rise in my cheeks. A new business idea? This was the first I was hearing of it. And where did she get the money for a $2,000 laptop? The sick feeling in my stomach intensified. It was all starting to connect in my mind, but the pieces were not forming a picture I wanted to see. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to defend me. I waited for him to tell his sister she was out of line. I waited for him to say anything at all. He just sat there, staring at his empty plate. He said nothing. His silence was the loudest sound in the room. It was a confirmation of everything Clara had said. In his eyes, I had failed. I had not put him first. That was the moment something inside me broke. The part of me that was always willing to keep the peace, to compromise, to sacrifice, it shattered into a million pieces. A new feeling started to take its place. It was cold and hard and clear. It was resolve. This dinner, this accusation, was not the beginning of the story. It was the end of one. The real story had started weeks earlier with a simple, nagging feeling that something was wrong. It began with our finances. Mark and I had a joint savings account. We had been diligently putting money into it for over a year. It was our house fund. We dreamed of buying a small home with a backyard for a dog. We talked about it all the time. It was our shared goal, the foundation of the future we were building. Every month, we would sit down together and review our budget. We would celebrate each milestone, each $1,000 we saved. It was a symbol of our partnership. At least, that is what I thought. One Tuesday afternoon, I logged into our online banking portal to pay a bill. I happened to glance at the balance of our savings account. My heart stopped. It was nearly empty. There was less than $100 in it. Just the day before, there had been over $20,000. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. It had to be a mistake, a glitch in the system. I refreshed the page. The balance remained the same. I refreshed it again, and again. Panic began to set in. I clicked on the transaction history. There it was. A single massive withdrawal from the previous day. $20,000, transferred to an unknown account. My hands started to shake. I could not breathe. This had to be some kind of fraud. Someone must have hacked our account. I immediately called the bank. I spoke to a representative who was calm and professional. I explained the situation, my voice tight with anxiety. He asked me a series of security questions. I answered them all. He put me on hold. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Every second felt like an hour. My mind was racing, imagining all the terrible possibilities. When the representative came back on the line, his tone had changed. It was still professional, but there was a note of caution in it. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "I have reviewed the transaction. It was an internal transfer, initiated online from a recognized device using the correct password and two-factor authentication." I did not understand. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means the transfer was not fraudulent," he explained. "It was authorized by one of the account holders." There were only two account holders, me and Mark, and I had not authorized it. The blood drained from my face. "Was it my husband?" I whispered. "Did Mark make the transfer?" There was a pause. "I cannot disclose that information due to privacy policies, ma'am," he said. "But I can confirm the transfer was legitimate and authorized from within the account." I hung up the phone. My body felt cold and numb. It could not be true. Mark would not do that. He would not take our entire life savings without talking to me. We were a team. We made decisions together. There had to be an explanation. A good reason. I waited for Mark to come home from work. The hours crawled by. I paced the living room, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I tried to come up with a plausible scenario. Maybe there was an emergency with his family. Maybe his parents needed money for medical bills. But even then, he would have told me. He would have called me. We would have discussed it. The silence was what scared me the most. When he finally walked through the door, I tried to act normal. I did not want to accuse him of anything until I had heard his side of the story. "How was your day?" I asked, my voice strained. "Fine," he said, kicking off his shoes. "Long." He walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. He seemed completely normal. He was not acting like someone who had just emptied our life savings. I took a deep breath. I had to ask. I could not let it go. "Mark," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "I was online today, paying a bill. I noticed something strange with our savings account." He did not turn around. He just stood there, staring into the fridge. "What about it?" he asked, his voice muffled. "The money is gone," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "All of it. $20,000. The bank said it was a transfer. Did you do it?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he closed the refrigerator door and turned to face me. His expression was blank. "Yes," he said simply. No explanation, no apology, just a single word that confirmed my worst fear. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Where did it go?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. He looked annoyed, as if I was bothering him with a trivial question. "It was an investment opportunity," he said. "Something came up. I had to act fast." An investment. He had taken our entire future and gambled it away on some opportunity without even telling me. "What kind of investment?" I pressed. "You do not need to worry about it," he said dismissively. "It's a sure thing. We'll get the money back, plus more in a few months." I could not believe what I was hearing. He was treating me like a child, like I had no right to know what happened to our money. "Mark, that was our house fund," I said, my voice rising with a mix of anger and hurt. "That was everything we had saved. You can't just take it without talking to me." He finally looked at me and his eyes were cold. "It's my money too, Sarah," he said. "I earned it. I can do what I want with it." That was when I knew something was seriously wrong. It had never been my money or his money before. It was always our money. The way he said it with such casual cruelty, it was like he was drawing a line between us. He was pushing me away. I tried to argue with him. I tried to make him understand how much he had hurt me, how much he had betrayed my trust. But it was like talking to a wall. He shut down completely. He refused to give me any more details about the investment. He just kept repeating that I needed to trust him. But how could I trust him? He had lied to me by omission. He had stolen our future from right under my nose. That night, I slept in the guest room. I could not bear to be near him. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in my head. His coldness, his dismissiveness. It was not just about the money. It was about the utter lack of respect. He had made a monumental decision about our life together without any regard for my feelings or my opinion. He had treated me like I did not matter. The next morning, I decided I could not let it go. I needed answers. While Mark was in the shower, I did something I had never done before. I went through his things. I felt guilty and ashamed, but I felt a desperate need to understand what was happening. I started with his laptop bag. I found a folder with some financial documents in it. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were papers for a new business, a limited liability company. The name on the documents was not just Mark's. It was his and Clara's. My blood ran cold. They were partners. The business was some kind of boutique consulting firm. It was a vague and risky venture, the kind of thing that required a lot of startup capital. The kind of thing that would need, say, $20,000 to get off the ground. It all clicked into place. The investment opportunity was not some stock or property. It was Clara. He had given our life savings to his sister so they could start a business together, a business he had never once mentioned to me. The betrayal was so much deeper than I had imagined. It was not just a financial decision. It was a secret alliance. He had chosen his sister over me, over our future. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had to sit down on the floor. I thought about all the times I had felt like an outsider. All the times he had taken her side in an argument. All the times he had dismissed my feelings about her. It was not just my imagination. It was real. They had a bond that excluded me completely. And now they had used our money to solidify it. I put the papers back in his bag exactly as I had found them. I did not want him to know that I knew. Not yet. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full extent of their plan. I spent the next few days in a fog. I went through the motions of my life. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I talked to Mark about trivial things. But underneath the surface, I was a mess of anger and pain. I felt like I was living with a stranger. Every time he looked at me, I wondered what he was thinking. What other secrets was he keeping? I started paying closer attention to his phone calls. I watched how he acted when he was around Clara. They were constantly whispering and laughing together. They shared inside jokes that I was not a part of. They were a team, and I was the enemy. One evening, I overheard a part of a phone conversation he was having with her. He was in his office with the door slightly ajar. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. "She's starting to ask questions," Mark said, his voice low. I told her it was an investment. I think she bought it for now. There was a pause. I could not hear Clara's reply. Then Mark spoke again. I know. We just need to keep her in the dark for a little longer. Once the business takes off, she'll come around. She'll see it was the right decision." Keep me in the dark. The words echoed in my head. They were actively conspiring against me. They saw me as an obstacle to be managed, not a partner to be included. He continued talking. "She's just so risk-averse. She never would have agreed to it. She doesn't understand business. It was better this way. Easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, right?" He chuckled. It was a cold, cruel sound. That was the moment my sadness turned into something else. It hardened into a cold, sharp anger. Forgiveness? He thought he could lie to me, steal from me, and then just ask for forgiveness later, as if it were a minor inconvenience. He thought I was too stupid to understand business. I had a degree in finance. I managed our household budget with meticulous care. I was the reason we had managed to save $20,000 in the first place. The disrespect was staggering. I walked away from the door before I could hear any more. I went to the guest room and closed the door. I sat on the bed in the dark, my mind racing. I was not going to be managed. I was not going to be kept in the dark. And I was certainly not going to just forgive and forget. He had made a choice. He had chosen his sister over his wife. He had chosen his own selfish desires over our shared future. And now I was going to make my own choice. I decided to start my own investigation. I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof that I could use to protect myself. I was not sure what my end goal was yet. Divorce? Separation? All I knew was that I could not continue to live in this lie. I needed to have all the facts before I made any decisions. I started with our financial records. I went online and downloaded all of our bank statements for the past year. I went through them line by line, looking for any other unusual transactions. I found a few small transfers to Clara's account over the past few months. They were for a few $100s each, labeled as gift or loan. Mark had never mentioned them to me. It was clear that he had been secretly funding her for a while. This was not a one-time thing. It was a pattern of behavior. Next, I looked at our credit card statements. I found charges for expensive dinners that I had not been invited to, charges for business lunches with names I did not recognize, charges for software and subscriptions related to their new business venture. He had been using our joint credit card to fund his secret life. I felt sick. The lies were everywhere. Our entire financial life was a web of his deceit. I started a new spreadsheet on my personal computer. I documented every single unauthorized transaction. I included the date, the amount, and the recipient. I saved copies of the bank statements and credit card bills. I was building a case. I did not know who I was building it for, but I knew I needed it. My best friend, Jessica, knew something was wrong. I had been distant and quiet for days. She called me one afternoon while I was at work. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "You don't sound like yourself." I hesitated. I had not told anyone what was going on. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed that I had let this happen. But I needed to talk to someone. I could not carry this burden alone anymore. "Can we meet for coffee?" I asked, my voice cracking. We met at a small cafe near my office. I told her everything. The empty savings account, the secret business with Clara, the overheard phone call, the financial lies. As I spoke, the tears I had been holding back for days finally started to fall. I cried for my broken heart, for my shattered trust, and for the future that had been stolen from me. Jessica listened patiently, holding my hand across the table. She did not interrupt. She just let me pour it all out. When I was finished, she looked at me with a fierce, protective anger in her eyes. "He is a monster, Sarah," she said, her voice low and steady. "What he did is not just a betrayal. It's financial abuse. It's theft. You cannot stay with him." Her words were harsh, but they were what I needed to hear. I had been trying to find excuses for him, to rationalize his behavior, but there was no excuse. What he had done was unforgivable. "What do I do?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "I feel so lost." Jessica squeezed my hand. "You get smart," she said. "You gather all the evidence you can. You talk to a lawyer. You make a plan. You do not let him get away with this." Her words gave me strength. She was right. I could not let him win. I had to fight for myself. I spent the next week continuing my investigation. I became a detective in my own life. I was careful not to let Mark suspect anything. I pretended that everything was fine. I smiled. I made dinner. I asked about his day. It was the hardest acting job of my life. Inside, I was seething with a cold, controlled rage. One night, Mark left his phone on the coffee table when he went to take a shower. I knew his passcode. I had never felt the need to check his phone before. I had always trusted him completely. But that trust was gone. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. I opened his messages. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I scrolled down to his conversations with Clara. The message thread went back for months. I started reading. It was worse than I could have ever imagined. They talked about me constantly. They called me controlling because I wanted to stick to our budget. They called me unsupportive because I did not want to fund Clara's endless stream of bad ideas. They mocked my dreams of buying a house, calling it boring and domestic. They had been planning this business for over 6 months. They had a detailed business plan, a website, and a list of potential clients. They had done all of this behind my back. They had used me. My stable income and good credit were the foundation they were building their new life on. A life that clearly did not include me in any meaningful way. One message in particular stood out. It was from Clara to Mark, sent the day after he had taken the money. "Did you tell the ball and chain yet?" she had written. "Or is she still happily clueless, planning her little dream house?" Mark had replied with a laughing emoji. "Clueless. I told her it was an investment. She'll get over it. She always does." The cruelty of it took my breath away. The ball and chain. That is what they called me. A weight holding him back. I had spent the last 3 years of my life supporting him, loving him, and building a life with him. And this is what he thought of me. I took screenshots of the most damning messages. I sent them to a new email account that I had created for this purpose. I forwarded every piece of evidence I found. The bank statements, the credit card bills, the business documents. I was creating a digital paper trail of his betrayal. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a few days later. I came home from work early and found a letter on the kitchen counter. It was from a lawyer. It was addressed to Mark. I knew I should not open it, but I could not stop myself. It was a formal agreement, a loan document. Mark had not just given Clara the $20,000. He had loaned it to her with a formal repayment plan and interest. But that was not the shocking part. The shocking part was the collateral. As security for the loan, Mark had put up our car. The car that was in both of our names. The car that I drove to work every day. He had used our joint asset to secure a secret loan for his sister, and he had done it without my knowledge or my consent. I looked closer at the signature line. He had signed his name, and then he had signed mine. He had forged my signature. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. This was not just betrayal. This was a crime. He had committed fraud. He had forged my name on a legal document. The implications were serious. He could go to jail for this. I made a copy of the loan agreement. I sent it to my secret email account along with everything else. I now had a mountain of evidence. I had proof of the theft, the lies, the conspiracy, and the fraud. I had everything I needed. The next day, I made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I chose a woman named Ms. Davis, who was known for being tough and thorough. I took a day off from work and went to her office. I brought my laptop with all the evidence I had collected. I sat in her comfortable office and told her the whole story, from beginning to end. She listened intently, her expression serious. She did not say a word until I was finished. When I was done, she looked at the evidence I had compiled. She scrolled through the messages, the bank statements, and the forged loan agreement. She nodded slowly. "You have done an excellent job of documenting everything, Sarah," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "This is a very strong case." She explained my legal options. She told me that the financial misconduct and the forgery would give me a significant advantage in the divorce proceedings. She said I would likely be entitled to more than half of our marital assets as compensation for his fraud. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. Part of me wanted to confront Mark immediately, to scream at him, to show him the evidence, to make him face what he had done. But another part of me knew that would not be satisfying. He would just deny it. He would gaslight me. He would try to turn it around and make it my fault. I wanted more than just a legal victory. I wanted justice. I wanted him and Clara to be exposed for who they really were. And then, an idea started to form in my mind. Mark's birthday was in 2 weeks. His whole family would be there. It would be the perfect stage. "I want to wait," I said to Ms. Davis. "I have a plan." I explained my idea to her. She raised an eyebrow, a small smile playing on her lips. "It's unconventional," she said, "but I like it. It's bold." So we prepared. Ms. Davis and her team started drafting the divorce papers. They included a detailed account of Mark's financial fraud, citing every piece of evidence I had collected. They prepared a petition that would not only dissolve the marriage, but also seek full restitution for the stolen funds and punitive damages for the forgery. Meanwhile, I continued to play the part of the dutiful wife. It was draining, but I was fueled by a sense of purpose. I knew the end was in sight. I watched Mark and Clara, so smug in their secret alliance. They had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won. They thought I was weak and clueless. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The day of the birthday dinner arrived. I felt a strange sense of calm. I was not nervous. I was ready. I had spent the day preparing just as I had planned. But my preparation was not just about the food and the decorations. It was about steeling myself for the confrontation to come. I had my own set of papers, prepared by Ms. Davis, hidden away in my purse. When Clara delivered her line, "You never put him first," it was like a starting gun had gone off. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. I looked across the table at her smug, self-satisfied face. I saw the triumphant look she exchanged with Mark. They thought they had cornered me. They thought they had shamed me into silence. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. I placed the glass down gently on the table. The silence in the room was heavy. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. They expected tears. They expected me to defend myself weakly. I did neither. I looked directly at Clara. "You are right, Clara," I said, my voice even and clear. "I have not been putting Mark first lately." Her smile widened. She thought she had won. Mark's mother, Helen, looked at me with a mixture of pity and disappointment. I continued, "I have been putting myself first, for the first time in a long time, and it has been very enlightening." Clara's smile faltered. This was not the reaction she had expected. "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. I turned my attention to Mark. He was looking at me with a strange expression. It was a mixture of confusion and a dawning sense of dread. "It means I have been doing some research," I said, my gaze locked on his. "About our finances, about our future. The future you and I were supposed to be building together." Mark's face paled. He knew where this was going. He started to shift uncomfortably in his chair. "Sarah, this is not the time or the place," he said, his voice low and warning. "Oh, I think it is the perfect time and place," I replied, my voice still calm. "Your whole family is here, the people whose opinions you value so much. I think they deserve to know the truth." Clara jumped in. "The truth is that you are a selfish wife," she said, her voice rising. "You were holding him back. He has big dreams, and you were too scared and boring to support them." "Is that what he told you?" I asked, turning back to her. "That I was the one holding him back? Or did he leave out the part where he stole $20,000 of our joint life savings to fund your little business venture? The money we were saving for a down payment on a house. Our house." The color drained from Clara's face. She was speechless. Helen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mark, is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mark did not answer. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with panic. He had to regain control of the narrative. He had to make me the villain again. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He threw it on the table in front of me. "You want to talk about the truth, Sarah?" he said, his voice shaking with feigned anger. "Here is the truth. I am done. I cannot live like this anymore. I cannot be with someone who does not support me, who does not believe in me." He pointed at the envelope. "Those are divorce papers. I have had enough." The family gasped again. Clara looked at him with admiration. He was taking charge. He was finally getting rid of the ball and chain. He thought this was his winning move. He thought he had checkmated me. I looked at the envelope on the table. I did not touch it. I simply smiled. It was a small, knowing smile. "You think you are the one ending this, Mark?" I asked softly. He looked confused. This was not going according to his plan. I reached into my purse and pulled out my own envelope. It was thicker than his. I placed it on the table next to his. "You are a little late," I said. I already filed. Now it was his turn to be speechless. He stared at my envelope as if it were a snake. "What is that?" he stammered. "That," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength, "is a copy of the divorce petition I filed last week. It includes a full accounting of the $20,000 you transferred without my consent. It also includes this." I reached into my purse again and pulled out another document. It was the copy of the loan agreement. I placed it on the table for everyone to see. This is a loan agreement between you and Clara for the $20,000, and it is secured with our car as collateral. I pointed to the bottom of the page. And this is my signature, or rather a very clumsy attempt at my signature. A forgery. I looked at Helen. Your son committed fraud, Helen. He forged my name on a legal document. That is a felony. The room erupted. Helen started to cry. Mark's father stood up, his face red with anger. He looked at Mark with utter disgust. What have you done? He yelled. Clara tried to defend him. He did it for us, she shrieked. He did it for our dream. I turned to her, my eyes like ice. You knew about this? I asked. You knew he stole from me and forged my name? She could not meet my gaze. Her silence was all the answer I needed. Mark was cornered. He was exposed. He looked around the table at the faces of his family, at their shock and disappointment. He saw no allies. He had lost. He finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He had underestimated me. He had thought I would just roll over and accept his betrayal. He had never imagined that I would fight back. And he certainly had never imagined that I would be so prepared. The aftermath of that dinner was swift and brutal. Mark's family turned on him completely. His father, a man I had always seen as quiet and passive, was furious. He told Mark that he had disgraced the family name. He was a man who valued honesty and integrity above all else, and his son had shown he had neither. He told Mark he was not welcome in their home until he made things right. Helen was heartbroken. She called me the next day, crying. She apologized over and over again. I am so sorry, Sarah, she said through her sobs. I had no idea. I raised him better than this. I am so ashamed. I did not know what to say. I felt sorry for her. She was a victim in this too, in a way. Her son's actions had shattered her image of her family. It is not your fault, Helen, I said softly. Clara faced her own consequences. With the truth out in the open, her role as the manipulator and co-conspirator was clear. Her parents were livid with her. They saw how she had poisoned Mark against me, how she had encouraged his deceit. The loan was now a source of huge contention. Mark's father demanded that she pay the money back immediately, but of course she could not. She had already spent a large portion of it on setting up their sham business. The laptop, the software, a deposit on a small office space. It was all gone. The business, which had been their shared dream, was now a toxic asset. It collapsed before it even began. They had no clients, no income, and now no family support. They were left with nothing but debt and resentment. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. With the mountain of evidence I had, Mark had no choice but to agree to my terms. My lawyer, Ms. Davis, was brilliant. She argued that his financial fraud constituted a dissipation of marital assets. The judge agreed. In the final settlement, I was awarded the full $20,000 that he had taken. I also got to keep the car, free and clear. And because he had used our joint credit cards to fund his secret business, he was made solely responsible for that debt. He had to sell many of his personal belongings, including the fancy new laptop Clara had bought him, to start paying it all off. He was left financially ruined. He had to move into a small, cheap apartment on the other side of town. Clara, unable to afford her own place anymore, was forced to move in with him. I could only imagine how tense that living situation must have been. I saw Mark one last time, when he came to the house to pick up his remaining things. He looked tired and defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen bitterness. He did not look at me. He just packed his boxes in silence. As he was leaving, he finally spoke. "Are you happy now?" he asked, his voice laced with venom. "You destroyed my life." I looked at him, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pity. Just a vast empty space where my love for him used to be. "You destroyed your own life." "Mark," I said calmly, "I just turned on the light so everyone could see it." He had no reply to that. He just turned and walked away. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. In the months that followed, I started to rebuild my life. I sold the house that we had lived in together. It had too many bad memories. I used the money from the settlement and the sale of the house to put a down payment on a small condo in a nice part of the city. It was all mine. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall was chosen by me. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could feel safe and at peace. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage. I spent more time with Jessica, who had been my rock through the whole ordeal. We went out for dinner, went to movies, and took a weekend trip to the beach. I started to feel like myself again, the real me, the person I was before I had tried to shrink myself to fit into Mark's world. I learned a valuable lesson from the whole experience. I learned that keeping the peace at the expense of my own happiness was not a compromise. It was a form of self-betrayal. I had allowed Mark and Clara to treat me poorly for years because I was afraid of conflict. I was afraid of being alone. But I learned that being alone is not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing is being with someone who makes you feel alone. I learned to trust my instincts. That nagging feeling that something was wrong, the feeling I had tried to ignore for so long, had been right all along. I promised myself that I would never ignore it again. I would always listen to that inner voice. One day, about a year after the divorce, I ran into Helen at the grocery store. She looked older, more tired than I remembered. She saw me and her eyes filled with tears. We talked for a few minutes in the aisle. She told me that Mark and Clara were no longer speaking. Their failed business and the financial fallout had destroyed their relationship. They blamed each other for everything that had happened. Mark was working a low-paying job, struggling to pay off his debts. Clara had moved back in with her parents, defeated and bitter. "He lost everything, Sarah," Helen said, her voice full of sorrow. "His family, his wife, his self-respect." I nodded, but I did not feel any sense of triumph. Just a quiet sadness for the man he could have been if he had chosen a different path. As I walked away from her, I thought about what he had said to me that last day. "You destroyed my life." He was wrong. He had a choice. He could have chosen to be a partner. He could have chosen to be honest. He could have chosen to respect me. He could have chosen our future. But he did not. He chose secrets. He chose lies. He chose his sister. He put himself first in the most destructive way possible. And in the end, he was the one who paid the price. I, on the other hand, had found a new life. A life that was smaller, quieter, but infinitely more peaceful. A life that was entirely my own. I had put myself first, and it had saved me. They had finally learned what it feels like to be small. And I had finally learned what it feels like to be free. The journey to that freedom was not easy. The weeks leading up to that fateful birthday dinner were some of the most difficult of my life. Living a double life, pretending to be the happy wife while secretly gathering evidence against my husband, took a heavy toll on me emotionally. Every day was a struggle to maintain my composure. I would wake up in the morning in the guest room, the cold reality of my situation crashing down on me. I would have to force myself to get out of bed, to put on a brave face, and to interact with the man who had so thoroughly betrayed me. The man who was sleeping just down the hall, completely oblivious to the storm that was gathering. The small talk was the hardest part. The mundane, everyday conversations that make up a marriage. "How was your day? What do you want for dinner? Did you remember to take out the trash?" Each question felt like a lie. Each polite response was a performance. I felt like a fraud in my own home. I would watch him as he sat on the couch, watching TV or scrolling through his phone. I would look at his face, the face I had once loved so much, and I would feel a confusing mix of anger and grief. I was mourning the loss of the man I thought I had married, while simultaneously plotting the downfall of the man he had revealed himself to be. My conversations with Jessica were my lifeline during this time. We would talk on the phone every day during my lunch break. I would give her updates on my investigation, and she would give me the encouragement I needed to keep going. "You are so strong, Sarah." she would tell me. I don't know how you're doing it. I don't feel strong, I would confess. I feel like I'm going to fall apart. No, you're not, she would insist. You are building a case. You are taking control. This is strength. He is the weak one. Remember that. Her words were a constant reminder of my purpose. I was not just a victim. I was an agent of my own liberation. The process of collecting evidence was methodical and nerve-wracking. I had to be incredibly careful not to get caught. I would wait until Mark was asleep or out of the house to use his computer or look through his papers. My heart would race every time I heard a floorboard creak or a car door slam outside. I lived in a constant state of low-grade fear. But with each new piece of evidence I found, my resolve grew stronger. Each lie I uncovered, each secret transaction I documented was another brick in the wall I was building around myself. A wall that would protect me from his manipulation and deceit. I remember the day I found the emails between Mark and Clara discussing their business plan. I was on his laptop searching for financial records. I stumbled upon a hidden folder in his documents. It was password protected, but I guessed the password on the third try. It was Clara's birthday. Of course it was. The folder was filled with documents, spreadsheets, marketing plans, and a long chain of emails. I spent hours reading them, my stomach twisting into a tighter and tighter knot. They were so arrogant, so sure of their success. They talked about the future, about the money they were going to make, the life they were going to build. And in all of their plans, I was nothing more than a footnote, a temporary inconvenience. In one email, Clara had written, "We need to handle Sarah carefully. We can't let her derail this. Once we're successful, we can throw her a bone. Maybe buy her a nice purse or something. That'll keep her happy." A purse. They thought they could buy my silence, my compliance with a purse. The condescension was breathtaking. They saw me as a simple, materialistic woman who could be easily placated. They had no idea who I was. They had no idea of my intelligence, my strength, or my capacity for righteous anger. That email was a turning point for me. It erased any lingering doubts I had about my plan. Any small feelings of guilt I had about what I was about to do vanished. They did not deserve my compassion. They deserved to be exposed. The meeting with my lawyer, Ms. T. Davis, was another pivotal moment. Walking into her office, I felt small and scared. I was just an ordinary person caught in a terrible situation. But Ms. Davis treated me with such respect and professionalism. She listened to my story without judgment. She validated my feelings. She told me I was right to be angry. And then she laid out a clear, strategic path forward. She armed me with knowledge. She empowered me. I walked out of her office feeling taller, stronger, and more in control than I had in years. I had an expert on my side. I was not alone in this fight. We spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the confrontation. Ms. Davis and her team worked on the legal documents, while I worked on my own preparation. I rehearsed what I was going to say in my mind, over and over again. I wanted my words to be precise, powerful, and irrefutable. I did not want to get emotional. I did not want to cry or scream. I wanted to be calm, collected, and devastatingly effective. I was not seeking a messy, emotional fight. I was seeking a clean, decisive victory. I was preparing for a surgical strike, designed to dismantle their lies and expose the truth with maximum impact. The night of the dinner, as I was getting ready, I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the dark circles under my eyes, the result of weeks of sleepless nights. But I also saw a new expression in my eyes, a hardness, a determination. The soft, accommodating woman who had always tried to keep the peace was gone. In her place was someone else, someone who was not afraid to fight for herself, someone who was about to take her power back. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant black dress. It was understated but professional. I wanted to look serious. I wanted to look like someone who was not to be trifled with. During the dinner, I observed the family dynamics with a new clarity. I saw the way Helen and her husband enabled Clara's behavior, always deferring to her, always letting her have her way. I saw the way Clara reveled in the attention, the way she dominated every conversation. And I saw the way Mark orbited around her, like a planet around the sun. He was so desperate for her approval, so eager to please her. It was a deeply unhealthy dynamic, and I had been caught in the middle of it for far too long. I realized that my marriage had never been a partnership between two people. It had been a dysfunctional threesome, and I was always the odd one out. When Clara uttered those fateful words, "You never put him first," a sense of calm washed over me. This was it, the moment of truth. I felt no fear, only a cold, clear sense of purpose. I let her finish her little speech. I let her bask in her moment of triumph. I let the silence hang in the air. I wanted them to feel the weight of her accusation. I wanted them to see Mark's silent complicity. I wanted the scene to be perfectly set before I delivered my response. My opening line, "You are right, Clara," was designed to disarm her, to catch her off guard. It worked. She was so surprised that she did not know how to react. It gave me the opening I needed to take control of the conversation. From that point on, I was in charge. I laid out the facts one by one, like a prosecutor presenting a case. The stolen money, the secret business, the lies, the forgery. With each new revelation, the power dynamic in the room shifted. The smug confidence on Mark's and Clara's faces dissolved, replaced by a growing panic. The pity and disappointment on his parents' faces turned to shock and horror. I was not just telling a story. I was rewriting the narrative. I was exposing the truth that had been hidden for so long. The moment Mark threw his divorce papers on the table was the climax of his desperation. It was his last pathetic attempt to regain control, to paint me as the villain. He was trying to preemptively abandon me, to make it seem like he was the one leaving, the one who was fed up. But I was one step ahead of him. My own envelope, my own set of papers was the ultimate checkmate. It showed him and everyone else in the room that I was not the victim in this story. I was the one who had been in control all along. I was the one ending things, on my own terms. The sight of the forged loan agreement was the final, devastating blow. It was a tangible, undeniable piece of evidence of his criminality. It was something his parents could not ignore or explain away. It was proof that their son was not just a bad husband, but a dishonest man. A criminal. That was the moment that truly broke him. I saw it in his eyes. The realization that he could not lie his way out of this. The understanding that his life, as he knew it, was over. In the aftermath, as I dealt with the legalities of the divorce and the logistics of moving, I had a lot of time to reflect. I realized that Mark's betrayal was not a sudden event. It was the culmination of years of small compromises, of ignored red flags, of my own willingness to accept less than I deserved. I had been so in love with the idea of our marriage, with the future I thought we were building, that I had been blind to the reality of the man I was married to. He had always been selfish. He had always been weak. He had always been under his sister's influence. I had just refused to see it. The process of healing was slow. There were days when I felt a profound sense of sadness. I grieved for the life I had lost, for the dreams that had been destroyed. But with each passing day, the sadness was replaced by a growing sense of peace. I was free. Free from the constant anxiety of trying to please an unpleasable family. Free from the feeling of being an outsider in my own home. Free from the weight of his lies and secrets. I started to rediscover myself. I took up old hobbies I had abandoned. I traveled. I focused on my career. I built a life that was rich and full and entirely my own. I did not need a man to complete me. I was complete on my own. The final, satisfying piece of the story came about 2 years after the divorce. I was at a work conference in another city. I was having dinner with some colleagues at a nice restaurant. As I was leaving, I saw a familiar face at the bar. It was Mark. He was alone. He looked disheveled and unhappy. He was much thinner than I remembered, and he had aged a decade. He was nursing a cheap beer, staring blankly at the TV. Our eyes met for a brief moment across the crowded room. I saw a flicker of recognition, of shock, and of shame. I just gave him a small, polite nod, and then I turned and walked out the door. I did not feel anger or pity. I felt nothing at all. He was just a stranger now, a ghost from a past life. I walked out into the cool night air, took a deep breath, and smiled. I was finally, truly, free. The silence in the car on the way home from that dinner was the most profound silence I have ever experienced. Mark drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. His parents and Clara had refused to ride with us. They had called a taxi, their faces a mask of cold fury and disappointment. So it was just the two of us, a husband and wife who were now complete strangers, enemies in a war that had just reached its explosive conclusion. I did not look at him. I stared out the passenger window at the city lights blurring past. I felt strangely empty. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, leaving behind a hollow ache. I had won. I had achieved the justice I sought. But there was no joy in it. There was only the grim satisfaction of a necessary, painful task completed. The destruction of a marriage, even a bad one, is a sad thing. It is the death of a dream. And I was now standing in the wreckage of mine. When we got back to the house, he parked the car in the driveway and turned off the engine. We sat there in the darkness for a long time, the silence stretching between us. I knew I should get out of the car, go inside, and pack a bag. I knew I should leave. But I was frozen. I did not know what the next step was. Finally, he spoke. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Why, Sarah?" he asked. "Why did you do it like that? In front of my family?" I turned to look at him then. In the dim light from the street lamp, I could see the tears glistening in his eyes. They were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "Because your family needed to see who you really are, Mark," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. They needed to see the man who would steal from his wife and forge her name. The man who would lie to their faces for months. You built your whole identity around being the good son, the good brother. I wanted them to see the truth. "You humiliated me," he said, his voice cracking. "You humiliated yourself," I corrected him. "You made the choices. You told the lies. You committed the crimes. All I did was hold up a mirror. If you don't like what you see, that's on you." He had no answer to that. He just slumped back in his seat, defeated. I opened the car door and got out. I walked into the house, went straight to the guest room, and locked the door. I spent the rest of the night packing my essential belongings into a suitcase. I did not sleep. I just moved with a numb, robotic efficiency. The next morning, I left before he woke up. I left my key on the kitchen counter. I did not leave a note. There was nothing left to say. I went to Jessica's apartment. She opened the door and pulled me into a hug. I stood in her entryway and finally allowed myself to break down. I cried for everything I had lost, and for the uncertain future that lay ahead. Jessica held me, letting me cry until I had no tears left. Then she made me a cup of tea, sat me down on her couch, and said, "You're safe now. It's over." The legal process was a blur of paperwork and meetings with Ms. Davis. Mark tried to fight the terms of the divorce at first. He hired a cheap, aggressive lawyer who tried to paint me as a vindictive, money-hungry wife. But they had no case. The evidence was irrefutable. The forged signature on the loan document was the nail in his coffin. Ms. Davis presented the evidence to the judge with calm, professional precision. She also presented the text messages between Mark and Clara, which demonstrated their conspiracy and their malicious intent towards me. The judge was not impressed with Mark's defense. In the end, the settlement was even more favorable to me than we had initially hoped. The judge not only awarded me the full $20,000, but also ordered Mark to pay for all of my legal fees. It was a complete and total victory. The months following the divorce were a strange mix of liberation and loneliness. I had my freedom. but I had also lost the life I had known for years. I had to create a new routine, a new identity for myself outside of being Mark's wife. It was daunting, but with each passing day, it got a little easier. I found joy in the small things, waking up in my own bed in my own apartment, cooking whatever I wanted for dinner without having to consider someone else's preferences, watching whatever I wanted on TV. The quiet and the solitude, which had at first felt like a void, slowly transformed into a peaceful, comforting presence. I focused on my work and received a promotion. I started taking a pottery class, something I had always wanted to do, but Mark had always dismissed as silly. I made new friends. I slowly, carefully began to build a new life for myself, a life based on my own interests, my own values, and my own dreams. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Helen. It was a short, handwritten note. She apologized again for Mark's behavior and for her own blindness to the situation. She wrote that she hoped I was happy and that I would find someone who would treat me with the love and respect I deserved. She enclosed a check for $5,000. The note said, "This is not an attempt to buy your forgiveness. I know that is not possible. This is just a small gesture to help you start your new life. A small repayment for the pain my family has caused you." I stared at the check for a long time. I did not need the money. The divorce settlement had left me financially secure. But the gesture moved me. It was an acknowledgement of my pain. It was a form of validation that I had not realized I needed. I deposited the check and I sent Helen a short, polite thank you card. I knew that was the end of our communication. We were from different worlds now. Our paths would not cross again. But her gesture helped to close a painful chapter in my life. It allowed me to let go of some of the lingering bitterness I felt towards his family. Life moved on. I continued to grow and to heal. I learned to trust again, starting with myself. I learned to set boundaries and to stand up for myself. I learned that my happiness was my own responsibility, and I was not willing to compromise it for anyone ever again. The story of my disastrous marriage became a cautionary tale that I would sometimes share with close friends, but it was no longer the defining story of my life. It was just a chapter, a dark and painful chapter to be sure, but one that had ultimately led me to a better, more authentic life. Years passed. I met someone new. His name is David. He is kind and funny, and he treats me with an unwavering respect that I had never known before. He knows my story. I told him everything, because I knew I could not build a new future on a foundation of secrets. He listened with compassion and understanding. He never once made me feel like I was damaged goods. He just loved me for who I was, scars and all. We are building a life together now. A real partnership based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. We are saving for a house. Our house. And this time, I know that our future is safe. Because I am safe. I am strong. And I will never again allow anyone to make me feel small. I will never again forget to put myself first.